You've been told that transformation needs to be announced, that real change requires witnesses, validation, documentation on social media. But here's what shifts everything. The deepest alterations in your reality happen when absolutely no one is looking. They unfold in complete silence, invisible to every eye except your own. Like stumbling upon a secret passage in a room you thought you knew completely. You'd walked past that wall 1,000 times, certain of its solidity. Then your fingers find an edge, a mechanism releases, and suddenly you're stepping into a completely different dimension of possibility. This is what we're exploring today. The invisible quantum shift. The transformation that rewrites everything while the world sleeps, unaware that you're becoming someone entirely new. Here's the conditioning we've all absorbed. Change must be visible, measurable, broadcast to count as real. Our culture celebrates the grand announcement, the complete life overhaul shared online, the public commitment to transformation. But the truth hidden beneath this noise, the most permanent shifts never announce themselves. They happen in the quiet architecture of your neural pathways. Neuroscience reveals that your brain reconstructs itself through thousands of microscopic neural events, tiny electrical conversations between cells that gradually build entirely new circuits of thought and behavior. These foundational sparks of becoming occur completely beneath the surface, invisible to observers, yet they form the bedrock of who you're evolving into. And here's the paradox that traps so many seekers. The compulsion to broadcast transformation is itself evidence of the old identity trying to maintain control. Because genuine change doesn't need an audience, it needs coherence. Let's look at how quantum mechanics illuminates this principle. Before any measurement occurs, particles exist in what physicists call superposition. Every potential reality suspended simultaneously in the quantum foam, waiting. The collapse from potential into actuality doesn't thunder into existence. It happens in an instant so subtle, so quiet, that only the conscious observer recognizes the shift. Reality itself transforms without ceremony. This is precisely how your most profound personal evolution operates. You attune to a new frequency in the privacy of your consciousness, and the quantum field begins reorganizing around that signal without requiring anyone else's awareness or approval. Most people fail here because they're conditioned to expect dramatic evidence. But existence is architected to change in whispers, not shouts. Reflect on your own experience for a moment. Have you felt the exhausting pressure of trying to demonstrate that you're evolving? Sharing every insight online, explaining your new direction to everyone you know, desperately seeking confirmation that your transformation is legitimate. That hunger for external validation is actually a signal that the shift hasn't stabilized in your system yet. Authentic transformation doesn't perform for approval. It registers as a profound internal click, a knowing that needs no explanation. A shift in your fundamental state that moves beneath your awareness until one day people begin saying, "Something's different about you. I can't quite name it, but you've changed." That moment is when they're finally perceiving what's been unfolding invisibly within you for weeks or months. That's the secret passage revealing itself. Now here's the paradox most people never confront. The more invisible your transformation remains, the more irreversible it becomes. When you announce it publicly, you risk fragmenting your energy outward, scattering the very coherence necessary to stabilize the new version of yourself. When you hold it in silence, you concentrate and amplify it. This isn't about keeping secrets for their own sake. It's about achieving such deep internal alignment that the shift encodes itself into your nervous system completely before external forces can introduce doubt or resistance. Think of germination. The seed disappears into darkness underground. No witness, no celebration of its progress. Yet that invisible period is precisely where root systems develop and structural integrity forms. By the time the shoot breaks through soil, it's already established, inevitable, no longer vulnerable to being uprooted. But most seekers stumble into a specific trap here. They mistake external noise for internal progress. They pursue visible markers instead of cultivating the invisible state of being. Your brain craves closure, so it constantly searches for tangible evidence that transformation is occurring. Yet the genuine missing piece isn't found in external milestones. It lives in your internal frequency. Let this land for a moment. Your life will become exponentially more stable, magnetic, and expansive the moment you shift internally without requiring anyone else to validate that shift. That's the puzzle your subconscious has been trying to solve all along. Not how to prove change to others, but how to become change so completely that proof becomes irrelevant. Every wisdom tradition across human history points toward this same truth. Silence carries the deepest codes of transformation. Neville Goddard taught that the real creative power lives in what he called the inner chamber, the private space of imagination, where you assume the feeling of your wish already fulfilled. Joe Dispenza's research demonstrates that when your heart and brain enter coherence, your body becomes an electromagnetic signal broadcasting into the quantum field, and this broadcast requires zero external witnesses to reshape your reality. The silent frequency is already transmitting. Others don't need to perceive it for the field to reorganize around your new state. So let me ask you the question that must be asked. If transformation happens in such profound silence, if the shift occurs hidden from view, why do most people never walk through that secret passage? The answer isn't what you expect. It has nothing to do with discipline or willpower. It has everything to do with addiction. We're addicted to recognition, addicted to being witnessed, addicted to external confirmation that something is happening. This addiction keeps us standing directly in front of the door, unable to see that our hand is already touching the mechanism that opens it. We wait for applause to give us permission to step forward, but the hidden passage only reveals itself to those who move in silence. Here's the truth that transforms everything. Your reality can shift completely while no one notices, because the noticing was never the point. The point is becoming. And becoming always initiates in silence before manifesting as visible evidence. The less you attempt to prove your evolution to others, the more rapidly and completely the quantum field mirrors that evolution back to you. This is the principle the world doesn't teach, yet it's the foundation of every genuine transformation. Beneath the surface of everything you perceive as solid reality, there exists a field that governs all manifestation. Physics calls it the quantum field, an infinite ocean of potential energy where every possible reality exists simultaneously, awaiting selection. What most consciousness explorers miss is this critical detail. The field doesn't respond to announcements, performances, or declarations. It responds exclusively to coherence. It listens not to your words, but to your frequency. When your thoughts, emotions, and physical state align in a single direction, this alignment doesn't arrive loudly. It emerges quiet, subtle, almost imperceptible, like a lake's surface becoming so still it perfectly mirrors the sky above. The scientific framework for this invisible transformation lives in what's called coherence and wave function collapse. A thought, when sustained with emotion and embodied physically, becomes a coherent signal. That signal resonates within the quantum field, collapsing waves of potential into particles of manifest reality. But this collapse doesn't announce itself like thunder. It's more like a light switch activating in a dark room. Instant, subtle, complete. Yet because our minds are conditioned to expect drama, we dismiss these quiet shifts as insignificant. We search for obvious signs, dramatic evidence, external confirmation. But the field doesn't require confirmation. The moment coherence achieves stability, the change has already anchored into reality. Neuroscience reveals another critical layer. When neurons activate together in novel patterns, they begin forming connections. Initially, these new neural pathways are fragile, microscopic threads barely visible under the most powerful instruments. But through consistent repetition paired with emotional intensity, your brain strengthens these circuits until they become the dominant highways of your perception and behavior. The silent moments when no observers are present, these are precisely when your brain is physically constructing your future. The laboratory of transformation isn't on a stage with an audience. It exists in the invisible exchanges happening between synapses every microsecond. If you truly understood the power concentrated in these hidden moments, you would treat them as sacred ceremonies. Here's the incomplete puzzle that frustrates seekers. If the field responds to quiet coherence, why do so many manifestation attempts collapse into failure? The answer isn't found in greater effort or endless affirmation repetition. The hidden reason is contradictory signaling. Someone meditates for 10 minutes each morning, then spends the remaining 23 hours and 50 minutes rehearsing worry, fear, and doubt. To the quantum field, coherence never stabilizes. It's like attempting to tune a radio while constantly moving the dial. You never hold one frequency long enough for clear reception. This explains why certain people insist the principles don't work for them. It's not that quantum manifestation is broken. It's that they haven't learned to sustain the silent state. Notice this pattern interrupt. The quieter you become internally, the more dramatically your external life shifts. This inverts the narrative we've all carried. We believe we must struggle, force, and broadcast our desires into existence. But quantum physics reveals the opposite. The particles assembling your reality are already listening, not to your voice, but to your vibrational state. Every microsecond, your heart and brain either align or conflict. When aligned, you emit an electromagnetic broadcast powerful enough to bend probability curves. Yet this broadcast produces no sound. No one applauds. The change initiates invisibly. There's a documented case of a woman who transformed her entire trajectory through one simple practice. Every night for 30 days, she altered her state before sleep, practicing falling asleep while inhabiting the feeling of her desired reality already manifest. She told no one, made no announcements, posted nothing online. Yet at day 30, circumstances began rearranging themselves in ways she couldn't have engineered through conventional action. Career opportunities materialized, relationships healed, health improved. Observers labeled it coincidence. But the truth? This was the silent language of coherence communicating with the quantum field. The invisible ripple was already moving long before anyone saw the surface disturbance. If this is resonating with you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you stay connected to this frequency of transformation. Your brain craves resolution. So when results don't appear immediately, It convinces you nothing is happening. But that's the illusion. The field is always reorganizing silently before evidence manifests visibly. Imagine planting seeds, then digging them up daily to check for sprouting. This is exactly how most people sabotage their own becoming. They cannot trust silence long enough for roots to establish. Here's the loop you need to internalize. What unfolds in the unseen realm holds infinitely more importance than what appears in the seen. Just wait until you recognize how much has already shifted beneath your conscious awareness. Science and spirituality converge at this precise point. Physics demonstrates that energy fields influence one another without physical contact through resonance. Ancient spiritual traditions teach that prayer performed in secret, meditation practiced in solitude, inner work completed away from all external eyes. This is where true power generates. Both perspectives point to identical truth. The invisible governs the visible, which means the quantum field isn't persuaded by performance. It's moved by presence. And presence cultivates itself exclusively in silence. So ask yourself directly, if the field moves quietly, if neurons rewire without announcement, if reality collapses into form without applause, why do you keep demanding visible proof? The answer will challenge your conditioning. It's because you haven't yet learned to trust that silence is sufficient. But silence isn't emptiness. It's absolute fullness. It's the space where waves crystallize into particles, where potential becomes actual, where your life reorganizes while no one notices. The field has always been moving in whispers. The question is whether you'll learn to move in harmony with its nature. If you want to understand why some individuals completely transform their lives while others remain trapped in repetitive cycles, you must look beneath surface desires into identity itself. Identity is the true engine driving all transformation. It's not what you want that shapes your experience, but who you are being in each moment. The quantum field doesn't respond to desperate wishing. It responds to coherence between your state of being and the reality you claim as already yours. And here's the paradox. When you shift identity silently, without announcement, you're rewriting your entire script in ways no one can perceive until the evidence becomes absolutely undeniable. Science explains this with precision. Neuroplasticity demonstrates that your brain constantly sculpts itself to match whatever patterns you reinforce. When you identify as someone who struggles, your neurons fire in configurations that perpetuate struggle. When you choose the identity of someone who creates, new circuits begin forming, even before any visible evidence appears in your external world. The change initiates invisibly in your brain's physical architecture. But here's the twist most people miss. These new circuits are fragile initially, like thin trails in an untouched forest. If you expose them to the noise of seeking validation, announcing your shift before it has stabilized, you risk destroying the very pathways you're attempting to establish. Neville Goddard stated it directly. You don't manifest what you want. You manifest what you are. That's why he taught assuming the state of the wish fulfilled as a practice. You don't inform the world you're changing. You become the change internally, in complete privacy, until reality has no alternative but to reflect it externally. Joe Dispenza reinforces this with neuroscience. When you embody a new emotional signature, your physical body literally begins existing in the future relative to the quantum field. The shift is already complete long before anyone else can detect it. That's why the most powerful transformations aren't visible in their early stages. They're encoded in your identity beneath the surface, invisible yet absolutely unshakable. Let me interrupt the pattern here. The more you attempt to prove your transformation to others, the less real it actually is. Consider that carefully. If you already were that new version of yourself, would you need to convince anyone? Obviously not. The compulsion to prove is itself proof of incompleteness. The silent shift of identity requires zero performance. It's a becoming, a quiet alignment that stabilizes until external reality eventually conforms to match it. That's why initially it feels like nothing is changing. You're transforming silently while the external world takes time to catch up with your new frequency. But when it does catch up, the shift appears sudden to everyone else, though you know it's been unfolding invisibly for months or even years. Consider this example. A person who privately decides, "I am abundant now," and lives from that inner identity, even when their bank account doesn't yet reflect it, is broadcasting a coherent signal into the quantum field. Their choices begin subtly aligning with abundance. Their nervous system stops rehearsing scarcity, so opportunities resonate with them differently. Friends might notice nothing at first. Family might think everything's the same. But one day, circumstances pivot dramatically, and people ask, "How did this happen so quickly?" The truth? It didn't happen quickly. It happened quietly beneath the surface in the invisible realm of identity. There's a psychological puzzle your brain attempts to solve here. If identity shifts invisibly, how do you know when it has genuinely changed? The answer is subtle. You feel it somatically in your body. Old triggers stop activating you. Old fears lose their magnetic pull. Old patterns seem distant, almost irrelevant. That quiet detachment isn't indifference, it's coherence. Your nervous system is no longer addicted to the familiar frequencies. And when your biology shifts, reality has zero choice but to reflect that shift. But most people miss this signal because they're waiting for external proof first. They don't realize the inner shift is the actual proof. Everything external follows automatically. Take a moment and share in the comments. What's one old pattern or trigger that's beginning to lose its grip on you as you step into this understanding? Identity also explains why transformation feels impossible when you try forcing it through action alone. If your actions conflict with your core identity, the old circuits always dominate. It's like swimming upstream with a weight chained to your body. You expend tremendous energy, but the current of who you believe you are pulls you back to the starting point. But when identity shifts, action becomes effortless. You no longer need to convince yourself to behave differently. It happens organically. The person who identifies as a non-smoker doesn't battle cigarette cravings. The person who identifies as an athlete doesn't negotiate about training. The person who identifies as a creator doesn't force productivity. When identity shifts, behavior flows naturally, like water following gravity. Here's the curiosity loop to internalize. The real transformation isn't found in what you do. It's found in what you stop needing to prove. Just wait until you experience how dramatically your life changes when you stop arguing with the old identity and simply stop being it. This is why silence equals power. You don't waste energy convincing. You invest energy becoming. And when you do, the shift happening beneath the surface becomes the most unshakable foundation imaginable. The quantum field is always listening. And it doesn't hear your declarations. It hears your state of being. Beneath the surface, identity functions as reality's hidden language. When you shift who you are, even silently, the quantum field responds without question. And when that response begins unfolding, it appears sudden to observers. But you'll know the truth. The shift was always happening quietly beneath the surface in the invisible architecture of who you decided to become. Every genuine transformation begins with ritual, though not the kind you're imagining. Most people picture elaborate ceremonies or visible practices, but the most potent rituals are silent ones, performed in the private sanctuary of your consciousness and body, far from any observer's awareness. The alignment that reorders your reality doesn't require candles, altars, or announcements. It requires coherence, a simple, quiet practice of bringing heart, mind, and body into resonance. Practiced consistently, this becomes the silent ritual that bends the quantum field around you. Science explains the mechanism. The HeartMath Institute has demonstrated that when your heart's rhythm becomes coherent, smooth, and ordered, it synchronizes with your brain waves, creating physiological harmony. In this state, your body's electromagnetic field expands, radiating measurable energy into surrounding space. This isn't metaphor, it's physics. Every human heart generates a field, and coherence amplifies its strength. That field communicates directly with the quantum field, carrying the signal of your identity and intentions. But here's the paradox. Coherence isn't achieved through noise or striving. It emerges through quiet repetition, through silent rituals you perform when absolutely no one is watching. Breathing is among the simplest, yet most powerful of these rituals. Inhale slowly and deeply. Exhale even longer than the inhale, and allow your body to discover its rhythm. Within minutes, your nervous system shifts from survival mode into creative mode. Stress hormones decline, oxytocin and serotonin increase, and your body relaxes into trust. In that trust state, your signal to the field becomes coherent. The ritual is invisible, but its effects ripple through every dimension of your life. If you practice this before sleep each night, your subconscious carries the signal through the darkness, weaving your new identity into your biology's very fabric. Yet most people dismiss such practices as too simple. They want dramatic techniques, forgetting that the quantum field responds to simplicity, not complexity. But let's go deeper into why breath is so powerful. Ancient traditions called it prana, chi, or life force, but modern science is beginning to understand the mechanism. When you consciously control your breath, you're directly influencing your autonomic nervous system, the part of you that usually operates below conscious awareness. You're essentially hacking into the operating system of your body. And here's what most people miss. Your breath pattern is directly linked to your emotional state, which is directly linked to the electromagnetic signal your heart generates, which is directly linked to how the quantum field reads your frequency. It's all connected. One continuous circuit of energy and information. When you breathe consciously, slowly, with intention, you're not just relaxing. You're literally rewriting the electromagnetic signature you're broadcasting into the field. Studies using magnetometers have measured the heart's electromagnetic field, extending up to 15 feet beyond the physical body. That field changes its pattern based on your emotional state, and your emotional state is intimately connected to your breath. So this simple practice of conscious breathing isn't just calming you down. It's changing the very shape of the field you're projecting into space, which changes how the quantum field responds to you, which changes what manifests in your reality. All from something as simple as breath. This is why yogis spent lifetimes mastering pranayama. They understood something modern science is only beginning to measure. Here's the incomplete puzzle. People obsess over addition. More affirmations, more vision boards, more techniques, more effort. But the true key often lives in subtraction. What if the most powerful ritual isn't what you add, but what you stop doing? What if you stopped rehearsing fear before sleep? Stopped carrying old narratives into new mornings? Stopped feeding your nervous system reasons to remain in distrust? The silent ritual of alignment isn't about accumulating more practices. It's about removing the static interference so your signal can transmit with clarity. Just wait until you experience what unfolds when your internal silence becomes clean. Now, what we're exploring today is truly just the surface of something far more profound. The concept of silent transformation is actually one of 9 master frequencies I've mapped out in complete detail in my book, Beyond the Frequencies, a quantum guide to consciousness mastery. If you're feeling this pull toward understanding how to become the broadcast itself, rather than constantly trying to manifest from a place of seeking, the book takes you through the entire system, layer by layer, with practices that move you from unconscious transmission into embodied mastery. It's linked in the pinned comment below. Stories of transformation always trace back to unseen practices. A man who silently repeated gratitude every morning without mentioning it to anyone. A woman who fell asleep nightly rehearsing the feeling of already being whole. They told no one, created no spectacle, no social media documentation. Yet months later, their lives appeared completely different. People said, "You've changed," without ever knowing the invisible rituals that made it possible. This is the proof. What you practice in silence holds infinitely more power than what you announce publicly. Now pause right here. I want you to anchor this truth into action. Take a moment and comment below with this phrase: I transform silently while reality shifts. Write it as a declaration. Not for me, not for other viewers, but as your first conscious signal to the quantum field. The act of typing those words plants a seed of coherence. It tells your subconscious, this is the frequency I'm choosing. The ritual appears invisible to others, but it encodes directly into your system. And when you revisit those words later, you'll see them not as a simple comment, but as evidence that the invisible shift already began in this moment. Let's interrupt the pattern once more. Rituals aren't about external display, they're about internal states. Your body is the temple, your breath is the ceremony, your state of being is the offering. Every time you return to coherence, even for brief minutes, you're performing a ritual that instructs the quantum field. And because the field responds to quiet signals, you don't need to broadcast it loudly. One aligned breath carries more power than 100 frantic affirmations. One silent practice maintained with consistency outweighs years of noisy effort. Spiritual traditions have always encoded this knowledge. Mystics spoke of the secret place, the inner chamber where prayer and imagination held more creative power than public worship. Yogis taught pranayama not as mere exercise, but as alignment of breath and consciousness with universal flow. Even Christ taught, when you pray, enter your room and close the door. All traditions point toward identical reality. The ritual isn't meant for others to witness. The ritual is meant for the field to receive. And here's the loop carrying us forward. When you make alignment your daily ritual, you stop chasing change. It begins chasing you. The magnetic pull of coherence draws circumstances, people, and opportunities into orbit around your new frequency. The quantum field cannot ignore a stable signal. But this magnetism doesn't advertise itself. It remains silent, invisible, unnoticed by those not attuned to subtle energies. Which is why when your life suddenly reorganizes, people ask, "How did this happen?" And you'll know it was the silent ritual of alignment, repeated quietly and faithfully until the unseen became visible. Every silent shift initiates inside your consciousness, but it never stays contained there. Like a stone dropped into perfectly still water, it creates ripples traveling outward, touching everything in their path. Even if no one witnesses where the ripple originated, this is the hidden truth about transformation. Your inner alignment radiates into your relationships, your environment, and your opportunities, silently reorganizing reality without explanation. The effect is invisible initially, but once it reaches the edges of your life, it becomes absolutely undeniable. Science offers a framework for understanding this phenomenon. Rupert Sheldrake's morphic field theory suggests that patterns of behavior and thought create energetic blueprints that others unconsciously attune to. Similarly, quantum physics describes resonance. When two systems vibrate at compatible frequencies, they begin influencing one another without physical contact. This means when you shift your internal state, you're not only altering your personal reality, you're influencing the field of everyone connected to you. But here's the paradox. The most profound influence is the one no one can trace back to its source. They feel the shift, but they cannot explain it. Consider your relationships. You might have spent years trying to change someone's behavior through arguing, persuading, or demanding. Yet often, the moment you shift your own frequency internally, their behavior changes without a single word exchanged. The invisible ripple is operating. Coherence within you creates coherence in the field, and those connected to you begin aligning without understanding why. This isn't manipulation, it's resonance. The same principle that causes a tuning fork, when struck, to make another fork across the room vibrate. Your state initiates subtle reverberations in others, and the ripple always begins in silence. There's something profound happening at the quantum level that most people never consider. When you exist in a state of coherence, you're literally creating what physicists call a standing wave pattern in the field around you. This isn't abstract theory. Studies in quantum biology have shown that coherent states in biological systems can persist far longer than previously thought possible, creating what's called quantum coherence in warm, wet environments where it shouldn't theoretically exist. Your body, when in a coherent state, becomes a quantum system broadcasting a stable pattern into the field. And here's what changes everything. Other systems naturally want to synchronize with stable patterns. It's the principle of entrainment, first discovered when someone noticed that pendulum clocks hanging on the same wall would eventually synchronize their swings. The most stable oscillator becomes the pacer that everything else follows. So when you achieve internal coherence through silent practice, you're not just changing yourself. You're becoming a stable oscillator in the field, and everything around you begins unconsciously synchronizing to your frequency. This explains why people who've done deep inner work often report that their external circumstances seem to magically rearrange without them taking obvious action. It's not magic. It's physics. The field is reorganizing around the most coherent signal, and if that signal is you, reality bends toward your frequency. Here's the incomplete puzzle frustrating so many seekers. Why do some ripples seem to disappear before reaching the shore? Why don't internal shifts always create immediate external changes? The answer lives in consistency. A single ripple can fade quickly, but sustained ripples create waves powerful enough to reshape the shore. Your environment doesn't respond to momentary spikes of coherence. It responds to the stability of your frequency over time. This is why the practice of silent rituals repeated daily creates exponential effects. They don't simply ripple outward and fade. They accumulate, creating currents powerful enough to redirect entire timelines. Let's interrupt the pattern here. Think about stories you've heard of people receiving sudden breakthroughs, an unexpected career opportunity, a healed relationship, a dramatic turn of circumstances. From the outside, it appears like luck or coincidence. But beneath the surface, these were ripple effects building silently for months or years. What appears sudden is simply the moment when the invisible crosses the threshold into visibility. And once it appears, the world labels it overnight success, never realizing that success was gestating in silence the entire time. There's also a psychological dimension to the ripple effect. Humans possess mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing that action. This means your state of being unconsciously influences others on a neurological level. When you embody calm, others around you begin calming. When you embody abundance, others feel possibility opening near you. You never need to announce it. The ripple is invisible, yet it alters the collective atmosphere. This is why one person's inner work often elevates entire families or communities without a single word being spoken. But here's where many people fall into despair. They assume that if others don't notice their change, nothing is actually happening. That's the trap. The ripple effect often involves delay. Imagine throwing a stone into a vast lake. The ripples require time to reach distant shores. During that time, you might believe nothing is moving, but the motion is already underway. The field is rearranging in silence, and effects will appear suddenly in ways you could never have consciously predicted. Just wait until you see how many opportunities and synchronicities are already being organized around you simply because you shifted your internal state quietly. This also explains why you cannot fake resonance. The ripple effect cannot be manufactured through pretending. If your outer actions are loud, but your inner state is chaotic, the ripple will be distorted and weak. But if your inner state is genuinely coherent, even if no one witnesses your effort, the ripple will move powerfully through the field. It doesn't matter whether others approve. The quantum field responds to coherence, not performance. And when the field responds, external reality must eventually conform. Every wisdom tradition has taught this principle in its own language. The Tao speaks of Wu Wei, effortless action that flows like water, influencing without forcing. Mystics describe what they call the fragrance of transformation, a subtle emanation that changes everything without words. Even modern psychology recognizes the silent power of presence. People might not remember your words, but they always feel who you are being. The invisible ripple effect is simply the universal law of resonance expressed in daily life. So here's the invitation. Stop underestimating quiet shifts. Stop waiting for applause before trusting the ripple. The change you embody silently today will become the wave carrying your life tomorrow. Others might not notice the beginning, but they won't be able to ignore the outcome. The invisible ripple effect is always moving, shaping, and reorganizing your world. Whether you believe it or not, the only question is this: will you sustain the signal long enough to let the wave reach the shore? If this content is touching something real in you, if it's activating a recognition of truth you've always sensed, but never quite articulated, then I invite you to subscribe. Not just to this channel, but to this frequency. To this movement of consciousness, explorers who understand that the deepest transformation happens in silence. Hit that subscribe button now and join this community of people learning to move with the quantum field instead of against it. Because the more of us who embody this truth, the more powerfully the collective field shifts. The journey completes where it originated, in silence. But by now you understand that silence isn't absence. It's creation in its purest form. The greatest shifts in reality don't require recognition, validation, or noise. They require becoming. And becoming always begins quietly, deep within the unseen chambers of your consciousness and body. The true master of reality doesn't chase proof of change. They embody the change so completely that proof becomes irrelevant. And when the quantum field responds, the evidence arrives without fanfare. Sudden, complete, undeniable. Quantum physics has always whispered this truth. The wave function doesn't collapse when the world demands it. It collapses when the observer embodies coherence. It's instantaneous, quiet, unannounced. In the same way, when you stabilize a new identity within yourself, the universe reorganizes around it without requiring anyone's permission. The process isn't dramatic, it's inevitable. Silent becoming is the art of embodying a new frequency so consistently that external reality has no choice but to mirror it back. This is why identity forms the foundation. You don't need to prove or persuade. You need only to be. The moment you stop negotiating with the old version of yourself, the quantum field receives an unambiguous signal. Neuroplasticity explains it scientifically. Neurons activate in stable patterns, encoding new pathways of thought and emotion until they dominate your perception. Spiritually, Neville Goddard explained it through imagination and assumption, living as though the wish is already fulfilled. Both frameworks say the same thing. The silent state of being is already sufficient to command reality. The beauty lives in the subtlety. From the outside, nothing appears different initially. Friends might see you as unchanged. Family might notice nothing. But inside, something irreversible is occurring. You're no longer rehearsing the old narrative. You're no longer addicted to familiar emotions. You're no longer broadcasting static into the field. And that shift, though invisible, begins reorganizing everything around you. One day, evidence appears in ways too precise to dismiss as coincidence. A door opens, a relationship heals, an opportunity arrives in your path. The world calls it luck. You'll know it's alignment. And here's something most teachers won't tell you about this process. There's often what I call the silent gap, a period between when the internal shift stabilizes and when external evidence appears. This gap is where most people abandon their practice because they interpret the absence of immediate results as failure. But this gap is actually the most critical phase. It's like the period after you've planted seeds but before shoots emerge. Nothing visible is happening, yet everything necessary is occurring beneath the surface. Roots are establishing, structure is forming. The foundation is being laid for what will eventually become undeniable in the visible world. During this silent gap, the quantum field is essentially running calculations, reorganizing probability fields, adjusting the trajectories of particles and events to align with your new frequency. This process doesn't happen instantly because we exist in a physical reality with momentum and inertia. The denser the physical manifestation, the longer the lag time between frequency shift and visible evidence. This is why emotional states and small synchronicities shift quickly, sometimes within hours or days, while major life circumstances like career changes or relationship transformations might take weeks or months to fully manifest. But make no mistake, the reorganization begins the moment your internal coherence stabilizes. The silent gap isn't empty. It's full of invisible work happening in dimensions you can't perceive with physical senses. The key to mastering this phase is understanding that your only job during the silent gap is to maintain coherence, not to look for proof, not to doubt, not to waver back to old frequencies, just to hold the signal steady. Think of it like holding a note on an instrument. If you keep changing the note, you never create a melody. But if you hold one clear note with consistency, eventually, the entire orchestra begins to harmonize with you. That's what's happening in the silent gap. You're holding your note, and reality is beginning to harmonize, even though you can't hear the full orchestra yet. Here's the final pattern interrupt. The quantum field doesn't care about the noise you generate. It only cares about the signal you embody. Which means the most powerful step available to you right now is to stop announcing and start becoming. Let silence be your strategy. Let coherence be your proof. Because when you finally allow the field to mirror back who you already are, the change arrives so silently that no one notices until the results become impossible to ignore. This isn't about hiding. It's about sovereignty. It's about stepping into the quiet power of knowing that you're not waiting for reality. You are reality embodied. Joe Dispenza often teaches that the quantum field responds not to what we want, but to who we are being. Becoming isn't performance. It isn't declaration. It's embodiment. And embodiment always happens first in silence. There's a crucial distinction here that needs to be made clear. When we talk about silent transformation, we're not talking about suppression or denial. Some people misunderstand this teaching and think it means hiding, pretending, or forcing yourself to appear calm while chaos reigns inside. That's not coherence. That's fragmentation, which is the opposite of what we're teaching. True silent transformation means your internal state genuinely shifts into alignment. There's no gap between your inner experience and what you're cultivating. You're not pretending to be abundant while feeling scarcity. You're actually embodying the frequency of abundance, which might start as a brief glimpse, then becomes longer moments, then eventually becomes your baseline state. This is why practices matter so much. You can't fake your way into coherence. You have to actually do the work of shifting your nervous system, rewiring your neural pathways, training your body to hold new emotional frequencies. The silence we're talking about isn't about keeping secrets. It's about doing the real work internally before seeking external validation. It's about becoming so aligned with your new frequency that you don't need anyone else's confirmation because you feel it in every cell of your body. That's the sovereignty we're pointing toward. The quiet confidence of someone who knows their transformation is real because they're living it internally, regardless of what's manifesting externally yet. So what does this mean for you right now? It means the secret passage is already here. It means the ripple effect is already moving. It means the rituals of coherence are already shifting your biology and your future. The only step remaining is to trust the silence long enough for the wave to reach you. Stop questioning whether it's working. Stop searching for signs to reassure you. The reassurance lives within you. The new self is already alive. And as you leave this moment, carry this reminder. You don't need anyone to notice your shift. You don't need approval or applause. Reality will catch up in its own timing. Your task is to keep becoming quietly, steadily, faithfully. That's how mountains move. That's how realities shift. That's how you step into the life that has been waiting for you all along. Consider returning to this video each morning this week, letting these frequencies anchor deeper into your system with each listen. And if someone in your life is ready for this understanding, share this with them. Not to convince them, but because when you share quantum truths, you're actually strengthening your own coherence while creating ripples in the collective field that come back to you as synchronicities and accelerated manifestation. Before you go, drop one word in the comments that captures the transformation you're choosing right now. Just one word. Let it be your energetic signature to the quantum field, your declaration of the frequency you're embodying. And subscribe to stay coherent with this community, because the more of us who understand this invisible shift, the more powerfully we collectively transform the world without anyone noticing until it's already complete. Because the power of silent becoming isn't in what the world witnesses, it's in what you embody. And when you embody it fully, reality has no choice but to bow to the frequency you've become. Now, if you're recognizing that this silent shift is happening for you right now, there's something you need to understand about the precise moment when everything changes. I've mapped out the exact signs that appear right before your breakthrough becomes inevitable, the unmistakable signals the quantum field sends when your reality is about to reorganize completely. Watch this next video to discover what you'll see right before it's your turn to win. Because when you know these signs, you'll stop doubting and start receiving.